Hey guys, it's Team SoulBlaze, Vanity Ezel with another back at it again for another Yu-Gi-Oh video. So this time, as you've seen in our previous videos, we've been using EDOPRO to fight in Yu-Gi-Oh battles with decks that we want to build, but we don't have the money to build. So we've just been doing this, and now we're gonna do deck profiles on the decks that we have because we want to. So for me, I like to run. I'm just gonna go by numbers, and I'm gonna go by abilities. For me, I like the standard 60 card deck because that just my OCD refuses to let me not build a 60 card deck if I have the chance. I have 33 monsters, 17 spells, and 10 traps. And then I have 15 monsters in my extra deck along with all my sideboard filled. So let's get this started. First off, as you can see by like the name of the deck up here and by the first card I'm hovering over, this is a Utopia deck. Also, if you were to just look down at all of these. But anyways, let's get this started. So there's Zexo Weapon, Eagle Claw. I think 90% of this deck is Zexo Weapons, to be honest. So level 5, 2000 power, 1200 defense, and Winged Beast attribute, and it's not a vanilla. So here's its effect. If your opponent's life points are at least 2,000 higher than yours, so like say your life points are 2,000, if theirs is 4,000 or higher, you can use this effect. You can special summon this card from your hand, and then that's the only part of that ability. And then you could target one Utopia monster you control. Equip this monster on the field to the target. It gains 2,000 attack, and then once per turn, while this card is equipped to a monster, when a trap card or a trap effect that was activated on your opponent's side of the field resolves, negate the effect of that card, and then you can only control one Eagle Claw on the field. So pretty much how Zexo weapons work: they equip to Utopias, and they give them power equal to their own power, and then they do a thing when the opponent does a thing, and then you can only control one on the field because having multiple would be broken. Next up is also there was 2 copies of him, I didn't say that before. 2 copies of Zexo Weapon Tornado Bringer. Level 5, 1300 power, 1800 defense, dragon attribute, and frankly this is my favorite looking one. You can target one Utopia monster you control, equip this monster from your hand or side of the field onto that target. Really good because this thing cannot be special summoned, so that's actually helpful. It gains 1300 attack, and then while this card is equipped to a monster, your opponent cannot target that monster with card effects. If a monster equipped with this card will be destroyed, you can destroy this card instead. And you can only have one Zexo Weapon Tornado Bringer on the field. That's helpful because it prevents your monster from being destroyed. Utopias are literally the heart and soul of this deck. Without Utopia on field, it dies. So preventing it from dying by battle once and then preventing it from being targeted by effects is really helpful. So 2 copies makes it a good balance. 2 copies of Zexo Weapon Lightning Blade. So level 5, 1200 defense, 1200 attack, 2000 defense. You can target one Utopia monster you control, equip this card from your hand or side of the field to it. It gains 1200 attack. While this card is equipped to a monster, face up Zexo Weapon cards you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. That's helpful because it defends all your Zexo Weapons, including this one, which means your opponent cannot get rid of them at all, which is awesome. And then if a monster equipped with this card to be destroyed by an effect, you can destroy this card instead. So that's helpful. You have something that prevents it from being destroyed by effects, and you have something that prevents it from being destroyed by have your other cards being destroyed by effects. So if you have Tornado Bringer and Lightning Blade on the field, your Utopia gets like an extra 2500 attack points, so doubling the attack of all of them basically, and then they're all defended from effects, and your opponent can't touch them. If you can get one that prevents destruction by battle, then you're fine. Hint, hint. This one, where is it? This one. But anyways, now onto the other cards. 3 copies of Zexo Weapon Unicorn Spear. 1900 attack points, 0 power, 0 defense, so level 4. You can target one number 39 Utopia Ray, so only restricting to 1 card you control. Equip this card from your hand to that target. It gains 1900 attack points. If the equipped monster battles an opponent's monster, the opponent's monster effect is negated till the end of the battle phase. You can only have 1 Unicorn Spear on the field. So that's useful. Even though it only targets 1 monster in the extra deck, it's still useful because it's a level 4. This deck needs level 4s to bring out Utopia, since you're most likely just going to exceed summon Utopia and use him to rank up constantly. So even though it only targets 1 card, it's still useful, mostly because it's a level 4. And its attack power. Next, I think it's the strongest monster in this deck, to be honest. No, it's not. It's outclassed by Eagle Claw. Next up is SZW. I know that's Zexo Weapon, but I don't know what the S stands for. Fenrir Sword. Level 4, 1800 power, 1100 defense. When this card is normal summoned, you can target one Zexo Weapon monster you control that is an equipped card. Special summon that target in defense mode. You can target one Utopia monster you control. Equip this card from your hand to that target. When the equipped monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you can target one Zexal weapon in your graveyard and add that target to your hand. So that's useful. It can, like, say you kind of fucked up and you equip the card on accident, and you also, or maybe you just want to use it to Exceed Summon because you have another level 4 on the field, being this thing. You can bring out Familiar Sword, get back the monster that's already is equipped, like for example, Unicorn Spear, summon that thing, then use them to Exceed Summon a Utopia. Or if you don't want to do that, you could just equip this thing, and then every time it kills a monster, you get something back from your graveyard, which is useful, considering like 90% of the monsters are Zexal weapons. Next up is V Salamander, the variant form of Zexal weapons. When this card is normal summoned, you can target one Utopia monster in your graveyard, special summon that target. You can target one Chaos number 39 Utopia Ray V you control. Equip this monster to that target. Once per turn, while this card is equipped to a monster, you can one Exceed material from the equipped monster. Goddammit. One Exceed material from the equipped monster and negate the equipped monster's effects, even if this card leaves the field after the monster's effects still become negated. And if you do, destroy all monsters your opponents control. And if you do that, inflict 1,000 points of damage to your opponent for each monster destroyed by this effect. So they have a full field, everything's dying, and they take like 5,000 points of damage at the very least, which is awesome because just dealing effect damage. Yes, you could lose your abilities, but considering how much this deck ranks up by, losing one monster's ability when you're just gonna sack it to get something else is not that bad, to be honest. Next up is 2 copies of Zexal Weapon Slavier Male. Also, V Salamander is the only card in this deck that you can have multiple copies of besides these guys. So then, next up is Zexal Weapon Slavier Male, level 4, 1,000 attack and defense. You can target one Utopia monster you control. Equip this target from your hand or side of the field. It gets 1,000 attack points, and then when this card you control is sent to the graveyard because the equipped monster was destroyed by your opponent's card by battle or card effect, you can target one Utopia monster in your graveyard, special summon that target. You can only have one on the field, but that's useful because, like, you equip it to Utopia and they somehow get over the big Utopia. Then you can just get it right back, and then next turn just rank it up over and over again. They get more Zexal weapons out, which is really useful. Next up is 2 copies of Zexal Weapon Azure Strike. So you can target one Utopia monster you control. Oh, it's level 4 with 1,000 attack and defense. You can target one Utopia monster you control. Equip that monster from your hand or side of the field to the target. It gains 1,000 attack points. And then while this card is equipped to a monster, that monster can attack all monsters your opponent controls at once. So that's really, well, once each, which is really helpful because that means even if their monsters cannot die, like say they're playing Lunalights and their cards cannot die, you can still beat the crap out of them constantly with your big old Utopia, and it's just helpful all the way. Next up is 2 copies of Zexal Weapon Ultimate Shield, the only defensive card in this deck, to be honest. So when this card is normal or special summoned, you can target one of your banished Exceed monsters, special summon that target in face-up defense position. You can target one Utopia monster you control, equip this monster on the field to that target. It gains 2,000 defense, and then you can only have one Ultimate Shield on the field. So this you would only use, like say your Utopia was lacking in the defense department, just equip it straight from your hand, and then it becomes a giant human shield. So 2 copies. Now 3 copies of Heroic Challenger Extra Sword. I will let it be known, out of all these cards, only about 7, if we were to count each copy, well no, if we were to just go by normal cards, I only own 4 cards in this deck, and this is one of them. And this and this are the sole reasons why I'm always able to bring out Utopia on my first turn. Literally, I don't think I've ever not been able to do that. So, Heroic Challenger Extra Sword, level 4, warrior, 1,000 attack and defense, and then an Exceed monster that was summoned using this card as an Exceed material gains its effect. If it is Exceed summoned, it gains 1,000 attack points. So that does not apply if you rank up, as I've shown by misplaying on camera once, but that part doesn't necessarily matter. Because the Utopia that you use it for, aka this one, is going to get 1,000 attack points, which is really useful, because it just makes it a bigger beat stick. And I just love having my Utopia be a bigger beat stick, considering he's my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh card. Next up is Goblin Bird. 1,400 attack, 0 defense, level 4. When this card is normal summoned, you special summon one level 4 or lower monster from your hand. Also, after that, change this card to defense mode. So normally what I do is I summon this thing, then I bring out this thing, and then I overlay them to bring out Utopia. So he has big attack points, and he can stop any attack, and he's just a really useful card all around, which is why these are both at 3 copies in this deck. Next up, 2 copies of Zexal Weapon Phoenix Bow. Level 3, 1,100 attack, 0 defense. You can target one face-up number Chaos 39 Utopia Ray you control. Equip this card from your hand to that target. It gains 1,100 attack points, and when the equipped monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, inflict 1,000 points of damage to your opponent. So here's what you do. You bring out Utopia Ray. You equip this thing to it. Then you equip this thing to it. So now it can attack every one of your opponent's monsters once, and then each time it kills them, they lose 1,000 extra life points, which is really useful. And it can only control one bow on the field. Next up is 2 copies of Xyz Agent. So if this card is in your graveyard, also level 2, 900 attack and 300 defense. If it's in your graveyard, you can target one Utopia Xyz monster you control. Attach this card from your graveyard as Xyz material once per turn. So you only do this if you're like that desperate for an overlay unit. Like this card, for example. This card needs overlay units for its effect to go off. Ignore what just happened. So this is really useful in that one scenario, even though it can only be used once per duel. So 2 copies. Now it's time for the Dark Zexal Weapon. 2 copies of Dark Zexal Weapon, Chimera Clad, level 1, and Fiend attribute. So you can target one number 30, Chaos number 39. So it could be Ray, it could be Utopia Ray V, it could be Utopia Ray Victory. Frankly, yeah, it can only be those guys, but still, where is it? Wait, no, it can be Victory. Where is it? So equip this monster from your hand to the card on your field. The equipped monster cannot be destroyed by battle, which is useful. And at the end of the damage step, when the equipped monster attacks an opponent's monster, but the opponent's monster was not destroyed by battle, you can make the opponent's attack 0 even if this card leaves the field. And if you do, the equipped monster can attack again, which is really useful because that allows double attack. In the anime, you saw Yuma equipped Dark Zexal Weapon Chimera Clad onto this thing and beat the shit out of an opponent's monster, but was slowly close to death. But it's still a big beat stick. It can make something big. It can allow for another attack. And if you just have this thing, and this thing on the field, your opponent's in for one hell of a beating. I can tell you that much. Now on to 3 copies of 3 copies of Double or Nothing. When a monster's attack is negated, target that monster. It can make a second attack during this battle phase, and if it does, its attack points are doubled during the damage step only. In the anime, this was Yuma's ace card. There is a reason why I run 3 Utopias, a card that lets you search Double or Nothing. Wait, which one searches Double or Nothing? One of these does. This one. And cards that benefit from Double or Nothing. This thing, and maybe this thing. So yeah, really useful card, 3 copies. Next up, 2 copies of Utopia. So each time Utopia monster is special summoned to your side of the field, place 1 High Five the Sky counter on this card. All monsters you control gain 200 attack and defense for each High Five the Sky counter on this card. Once per turn, you can remove 2 High Five the Sky counters from this card. Special summon 1 Zubaba, Gagaga, Go, or Dododo monster from your deck. So I don't run any of those because I feel like the Zexal Weapon and the Goblin / Heroic Challenger deck kind of fits itself together. So I feel like that second effect isn't useful, so just only run it for the first effect. So 2 copies. Next up, 3 copies of Xyz Change Tactics. When Utopia monsters Xyz summoned to your field, you can pay 500 life points, draw a card, and you can only control 1 on the field. So it's useful. I run 3 so that you can see it easier, and the 500 life points is a small price to pay just to get an extra draw during their turn, because it can lead to combos, such as Zexal Weapons, who break the game if all 3 are on the field together and you're using this thing, or this thing, or this thing. I think you have to use this thing for it to go off, though, so. Next up is now onto the rank up cards. 3 copies of Rank Down Magic Numeron Fall. Target 1 Utopia monster you control. Special summon from your extra deck 1 Utopia monster with a lower rank than the monster you control by using it as Xyz materials. And then the monster Xyz summoned by this effect gains the following effect. If this card attacks or is attacked by an opponent's monster, the opponent's monster's effects are negated during the battle phase only. That is still good, because if they have battle-based effects, it falls. And that's useful because you're going to be ranking up a lot, considering everything. Which means, worst case scenario, if you cannot bring out Utopia anymore, because you don't have the cards in hand or resources to do it, but you have this thing, use it to rank down any of these guys, and then bring it back down to this. Which is useful because it still gets the overlay units. Next up is Rank Up Magic Astral Force. So target 1 Xyz monster you control with the highest rank, your choice of tide. Special summon from your extra deck 1 monster with the same type and attribute as that monster you control, but 2 ranks higher by using it as a material. During your draw phase, if this card's in your graveyard, instead of conducting your normal draw, add this card from your graveyard to your hand. You cannot special summon during the turn that you activate this effect, except by the effect of Rank Up Magic Astral Force. So normally what you do is you bring out Utopia, and then use Rank Up Magic Astral Force to bring out Utopia Beyond. Or you could, and then you can just keep doing that if you and then you can just use it as fodder. Normally, that's why this thing's at 2, because you're only going to use it like once, or maybe fodder for this thing, or any of these cards. But yeah. Next up, 2 copies of my favorite rank up card, Rank Up Magic Numeron Force. Target 1 face-up Xyz monster you control, special summon from your extra deck, 1 number Chaos monster with the same type as that monster you control, but 1 rank higher by using it as Xyz material. And then if any face-up cards are on the field other than this card and the monster summoned by it, negate the effect of those other cards. That's good, because if I'm correct, that isn't until the end of the turn, which means you can just flat out nullify everything. You can nullify field spells, monster effects, trap cards, anything. And your opponent cannot stop this, which means they're just going to have to sit there and then deal with hand traps if they have any. Next up is 2 copies of Rank Up Magic Limited Baron's Force. Target 1 rank 4 Xyz monster you control, special summon from your extra deck, 1 number Chaos monster that is 1 rank higher than the monster you control by using it as Xyz material. So it's just like the standard rank up, which is fine because it works. I run it for like anime reasons, I guess. Next up, the trap card that has the same name as the anime theme song, Halfway to Forever. Target 2 monsters in your graveyard, special summon both. Both effects are negated, if any, and if you do, immediately after this effect resolves, Xyz summon 1 light Utopia or Utopic Xyz monster using only those 2 monsters. That's useful, because that means all these cards are mostly level 4 or level 5, which means you can bring out this. You can bring out none of these, okay? So you can only bring out this thing. But that still works, because this is normally the thing that brings out your key, and you're normally going to keep sending it back to your deck, mostly because of this card, but still. Next up is 3 copies of the Door of Destiny. When an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, negate the attack and special summon this card as an effect monster, Fiend type, light attribute, level 1, attack 0, defense 0. It still counts as a trap card. During your standby phase, while this card is treated as a monster, you can banish any number of Utopia monsters with different card names from your graveyard. Inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent for each of those banished monsters, and if you do, this card gains attack equal to the damage they took. Okay, that's useful, because worst case scenario, I would only do this if I have no more Jar of Avarices left and I have most of my Utopias engraved. You can banish the Utopias, get power, get defense, and burn your opponent out, which is really useful because more likely than not, they're already close to death. Next up, 2 copies of Jar of Greed, just draw a card. And then Jar of Avarice, which I've been talking about for a bit long now. Target 5 cards in your graveyard except Jar of Avarice, shuffle all 5 into deck, and then draw a card. That draw is not really the reason why you run this. You run this because Utopia is more likely not going to end up in your graveyard really often, and you need him. So when you use an overlay unit ability, you send Utopia to the graveyard, and then you activate Jar of Avarice, send it back to your extra deck so that you can keep summoning it out, which is really useful. Now on 2Z extra deck. Number 39, Utopia! Light Warrior, Xyz monster, rank 4, 2500 attack, 2000 defense. To summon them, you need 2 level 4 monsters. 90% of this deck is level 4s. So, when a monster declares an attack, it can be you or your opponent, you can ditch 1 Xyz material from this card. Negate the attack. If this card is targeted for an attack when it has no Xyz materials, destroy this card. I don't care, because this thing nullifies an attack, which is the reason why you run double or nothing. You use Utopia, nullify an attack of a monster with that Dark Sex Weapon Chimera clad on it. Then you activate double or nothing. Double Z monster attack points and have it ram in again. Which is extremely useful because Dark Sex Weapon Chimera Clad's ability that doubles attack points stay there for the rest of the turn, which is useful. So 3 copies. Also because it's the only thing that targets any of these. Next up, number Chaos 39, Utopia Ray. 3 level 4 light monsters. You can also see some of this card by using a number 39 Utopia you control as the Xyz material. So as long as you have this thing on the field, you can bring this out. And its Xyz materials become this thing's Xyz materials. You can ditch 1 Xyz material from this card. It gains 500 attack, and if it does, 1 monster in your opponent's field loses 1000 attack. These changes last till end of turn. You must have 1000 or less life points to resolve this effect. So you can spam this as much as you want during the turn, but it's only going to stay for that 1 turn, and you have to be at 1000 life points or less to use it. So more or less like a Hail Mary card. And if you see me and Mandela's games, that's rarely going to happen, and considering that we kill each other right before we get to that mark. But if we do, it would be fun to see it. Next up, number Chaos 39, Utopia Ray V. Rank 5, 2,600 attack, 2,000 defense, 3 level 5 monsters. And I have level 5 monsters, but I don't really use them to do this. When this card in the owner's possession is destroyed by your opponent's card, either by battle or card effect, you can target one Xyz monster in your graveyard, return that target to the extra deck, and if this card has Utopia as an Xyz material, it gains the following effect. But first off, that's already useful, because you can get back Utopia in the graveyard, or I think you can get back this thing too, which is really useful, so all around good card. And then the other ability is once per turn, you can just one Xyz material from this card, then target one monster your opponent controls, destroy that monster, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attack of the destroyed monster. So that's useful. If the monster had like 3,000 attack points and you got rid of an overlay unit for this thing, you can effectively deal 3,000 points of damage just by using an overlay unit, which is really useful and has 2,600 attack. Next up, Utopia, Chaos number 39, Utopia Ray Victory, the light version of V. So 3 level 5 monsters, 2,800 attack, 2,500 defense. If this card attacks, your opponent cannot activate any spells or traps until the end of the damage step. If this card has Utopia monster as an Xyz material, gains the following effect. When this card declares an attack on a face-up monster your opponent controls, you can just one Xyz material from this card. Negate the opponent's face-up monster's effects, and this card gains attack equal to the opponent's monster's attack. These changes last till end of turn. So that's useful. It can steal a monster attack, so your opponent's guaranteed going to take 2,800 attack points, or whatever this thing's current attack point is at all times, which is really useful and does stuff. And then your opponent cannot target it with spells or traps during the battle step. Now on to other numbers. Number 39, Utopia Roots. 2 level 1 monsters. I do have them, but I never do that for this. When any player monster declares an attack, you can just one Xyz material from this card, negate the attack, and if the negated attack was an Xyz monster's attacks, this card gains 500 attack equal to that monster's rank times 500. So this card only works against the Xyz monsters. I run it in here just in case for that one scenario, also because it's a Utopia. This is one of the cards that you would use Numeron Fall on. I think it's the only card you would use. Well, yeah, you would use Numeron Fall on for this thing, but it can still be useful in like that one case scenario. Next up, number S39, Utopia Prime. 3 level 4 light monsters. You can also Xyz summon this card by using a number 39 Utopia you control as an Xyz material. Same thing as Ray, it gets the Xyz materials of Utopia. If your opponent's life points are at least 3,000 higher than yours, you can ditch 3 Xyz materials from this card and pay life points so that you have only 10 left, and destroy as many special summoned monsters your opponent controls as possible, and if you do, banish them, then inflict 300 points of damage to your opponent for each banished monster. So you would only do this if it has 2,510 attack points and 2,000 defense points. You'd only do this if you were extremely ballsy and you thought your opponent couldn't kill you next turn, so you just pay that overlay unit just to make sure. But I don't say it's worth it, but you run it just in case you need it. Next up, number 39, Utopia Beyond. One of the only cards Astro Force is going to be used on. 2 level 6 monsters. If this card is Xyz summon, the attack of all monsters your opponent controls becomes 0, and then once per turn, during either player's turn, you can just one Xyz material from this card, then target one face-up Xyz monster you control and one Utopia monster in your graveyard, banish the first target, and if you do, special summon the second target, then gain 1,250 life points, so pretty much half of Utopia's attack points. And then this thing has 3,000 attack and then 2,500 defense. That's useful because it can just bring back Utopia from the graveyard. You gain half its life, you gain life points equal to half its attack points, basically. And yes, you have to lose a Xyz monster, but you can lose any Xyz monster. And if Utopia Beyond's almost out of overlay units, you can just ditch it for that. Next up, number 39, Utopia Double. Rank 4, 2 level 4 monsters to summon it. 0 attack points, 2,500 defense. Quick effect. You can just one Xyz material from this card, add 1 double or nothing from your deck to your hand. The special summon from your extra deck 1 Utopia Xyz monster, except number 39 Utopia Double, by using this face-up card you control as a material. And if you do, double that monster's attack points, but it cannot attack directly. Which is useful because for the turn its attack points get doubled, and you can only use the effect of Utopia Double once per turn. Next up is number 99, Utopic Dragon. So 3 level 10 monsters. You can also Xyz summon this card by discarding 1 rank up magic spell card and using a Utopia monster you control as a Xyz material. The other card you would use rank up magic Astro Force on, and then once per turn you can target one number monster in your graveyard, special summon in defense mode, but its effects are negated. During either player's turn, when a monster effect is activated that targets a face-up card, you can ditch one exceeds material from this card, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. This is useful because you can bring out Utopia from the graveyard, you can bring out anything from the graveyard, and then you can just nullify effects that target this thing. And it has 4,000 attack points, 2,000 defense points, and it's a rank 10, which you're not going to bring out otherwise besides using the rank up in Utopias. Next up is Zexal Weapon Leo Arms. Rank 5, 3,000 attack, 1,200 defense. 2 level 5 monsters. This card cannot attack your opponent directly. Once per turn, you can ditch one season material from this card. Add 1 Zexal Weapon monster from your deck to your hand. You can target 1 Utopia monster you control. You can equip this card on the field to that target. It gains 3,000 attack points. During your battle phase, if the monster attacked this turn while this card is equipped to a card is equipped to it, you can send this equipped card to the graveyard. The monster that was equipped with this card can make a second attack on the opponent's monster during the battle phase. So what you do is you equip Leo Arms onto a Utopia, and then you equip you just basically do this combo, but plus this thing on it. And then you use this thing to nullify the attack, then you put double or nothing on it. So the attack points are equivalently at least triple the amount of a normal person's life points. Now on to number Future 0, let me type it, Utopic Future. So, using 2 Xyz monsters with the same rank except number monsters. I don't think you can summon this. Wait, yes you can, because you can use rank up magic Numeron Fall. So this is one of the other cards you would use for it. Cannot be destroyed by battle. It's always treated as a rank 1, by the way. Cannot be destroyed by battle, and neither player takes any battle damage from attacks involving this card. At the end of the damage step, if this card battled an opponent's monsters, you can take control of the opponent's monsters until end of battle phase. If this face-up card on the field would be destroyed by effect, you can ditch one of these material instead. So normally you just use it to take control of a big bad monster who's hurting you, and because it can't be destroyed by battle and you can't take damage, this card's effectively immortal, and if you equip the Zexal weapon that prevents it from being destroyed by effects, your opponent just can't touch it. So, 1 copy. If you want to put it in the sideboard, you can. Next up, number Future 0, Utopic Future, Future Slash. 2 Xyz monsters with the same rank except number monsters, once more, Numeron Fall. You can also see some in this card by using a Utopia monster or number Future 0, Utopic Future you control as an Xyz material. It gains 500 attack for each number monster in the graveyard and cannot be destroyed by battle. Once per turn, you can ditch one of these material from this card, then it can make a second attack during the turn. Which is useful because multi-attack gains power for each number monster in graveyard, which is going to be kind of often, and then it's just a big beat stick. And then our last Xyz monster, number S0, Utopic Zexal, the one Utopia out of all these cards, out of all the future Utopia cards that I actually own, and one of my favorite ones. It requires 3 number monsters Xyz with the same rank. This is kind of easy to do in this deck because they can all just be Utopias. So this card's original rank is treated as 1. You can Xyz summon this card by discarding 1 rank up magic normal spell card, then targeting 1 Utopia monster on your field and control it as a Xyz material. This card's Xyz summon cannot be negated, so your opponent cannot stop this with Solemn Warning. It can't stop it with shit. And when it's Xyz summoned, your opponent's cards and effects cannot be activated, so once more Solemn Warning, and this card gains a 1,000 attack and defense for each Xyz material attached to it. Once per turn, a quick effect. Once during your opponent's turn, quick effect. You can just one Xyz material from this card. Your opponent's cards and effects cannot be activated this turn. That's fun because your opponent can't do anything basically, which means they're just stuck with a bunch of vanillas, which could be bad for them and it could be useful for them, depending on when you use this. But it still gains 1,000 attack points for each of its overlay units, and it just brings out really usefulness. Now, number S39, Utopia the Lightning. Rank 5, 2,500 attack, 2,000 defense, 3 level 5 light monsters. You can also Xyz summon this card by using a rank 4 Utopia monster you control as an Xyz material. Cannot be used as an Xyz material for an Xyz summon, so you cannot overlay this thing at all. If this card battles, your opponent cannot activate a card or effects until the end of the damage step. Once per chain during damage calculations, if this card battles an opponent's monster while this card has a Utopia Xyz monster as an Xyz material, you can ditch 2 Xyz materials from this card. This card's attack becomes 5,000 during the damage collision only, which is useful for many different reasons. So, kind of stops your opponent from dick moving you, and it gets power. Next up, number 93, Utopia Kaiser. 2 number Xyz monsters with the same rank that have material. Once per turn, you can special summon rank 9 or lower Utopia number monsters with 3,000 less attacks, so pretty much Utopias. that have different ranks from each other from your extra deck up to the number of materials with different names attached to this card, but their effects are negated. Then ditch one of these material from this card for the rest of the turn. Unless this effect was negated, you cannot special summon, and any battle damage your opponent takes is half. While you control another number of Xyz monster on the field, this card cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects. So pretty much it becomes immortal, and it can just fetch you Xyz monsters from the extra deck. It's in the sideboard because it can just be useful. It can help you bring out Utopias if you don't have the materials to bring it out. Next up, number 98, Anti-Utopian. So pretty much Anti-Utopia. 2 level 4 monsters, 2000 attack, 2500 defense. When any player's monster declares an attack, you can ditch one disease material from this card, change that monster to defense mode, and then during either player's turn, when this card is in your graveyard, you can target one Utopia monster on the field, special summon this card in defense mode, and if you do, attach that monster to this card as an Xyz material. So you can only use this effect once per turn. So it pretty much brings it back from the graveyard, gets an overlay unit, and then it can just stop an opponent's monster's attacks, but in a different way. Next up, Utopia Buster. If you control a Utopia monster, destroy the face of monster your opponent controls with the lowest attack points at your choice if tied, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the destroyed monster's attack. So pretty much a way to nuke an extra monster on the field, deal extra damage, and then go for more attacks later on. Next up is Shining Hope Road. You can target 3 monsters in your graveyard, special summon all 3, but their effects are negated. Immediately afterwards, Xyz summon 1 Utopia or Utopic Xyz monster using only those 3 monsters. You cannot special summon anything else for the rest of the turn during the turn you activate this card. So normally you only do this to bring out like level 4s in your graveyard, or maybe a Utopias from your graveyard that can still be used for an Xyz material, and you just use that for that one reason alone. Next up is Lightwing Shield at 2 copies. When an opponent quick play spell, when a monster attack is negated, activate one of these effects. You can either make it the end phase of the turn, target one Utopia Xyz monster you control, its attack points become double for the rest of the turn, or if a Utopia Xyz monster you control would detach exactly 1 Xyz material to activate this effect, you can banish this card from the graveyard instead, which is useful. Lightwing Shield is what it's called. So basically, you can end the battle phase. You can end the turn in general. You could double a monster's attack points like double or nothing, and double or nothing's only in here because there's a monster that benefits from it. Or you could use this card as an Xyz material ditch instead. Next up is 2 copies of Rising Sun Slash, which is a really cool card. Equip only to a Utopia monster. It cannot be destroyed by card effects. Each time an attack is negated, place 1 Rising Sun counter on this card. The equipped monster gains 500 attack for each Rising Sun counter on it. If the equipped monster you control would detach an Xyz material to activate this effect, you can treat this card as one of its Xyz materials. That's useful because you can have multiple on the field, and then you can keep sacking it for effects, and it can just still nullify the attacks and then gain power off it. 2 copies of Reverse Breaker. Equip only to a Utopia monster. When the equipped monster declares an attack, target one spell or trap your opponent controls, destroy that target. Your opponent cannot activate spells or traps in response to this card's activation. So pretty much nuke a spell or trap, and that's all it does. Next up, 2 copies of Reverse Burst. So to be 1 Utopia monster, destroy all set spells and traps your opponent controls. So pretty much nuke all their face downs, which is awesome. Finally, 2 copies of Utopian Ore. Just 1 Xyz material from a monster you control. This face-up Xyz monster you currently control cannot be destroyed by a card effects till the end phase, which means it stays on the field. So that was the deck. This is one of my favorite decks, mostly because Utopias was like the first card I ever got a hold on, and it was my favorite deck. It always will be my favorite deck. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and burn up that subscribe button. And I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to keep your souls blazing.